Hello, everybody. BeMetalways here. Hope you're all doing well. Today, I want to talk about something a little bit different. So, it's not a show that will be repeating itself, it's a one off, but I'm going to break it into four parts. And I want to talk about the top 13 albums that shaped my musical life. Now, this is not the 13 best albums or my favorite albums or the most influential albums in the history of metal or anything like this. This is simply the 13 albums that had a huge impact on myself when I was younger and helped me to grow my taste and to learn new bands and to expand my horizons and getting into the different genres of heavy metal and rock music. I'll start with nothing less than the almighty Iron Maiden. Yeah, you may think Iron Maiden, but that's the reality, that's the truth. And the first album that I got was Power Slave, and this was probably 86. And what's more perfect than the Power Slave album cover? The Egyptian theme, the Eddie, the colors, all the details in it is just brilliant. By the time I got it, I was only 8 years old. So I was fascinated by this cover. At the time, I loved drawing and I loved Asian history, so everything came together to this cover. And honestly, that's how I got into the album in the first place. It wasn't because of the music. I mean, I was only 8, but then I had the album in my hands, so I put it in this turntable. Those little vinyls with stories for kids? Yes, so I put in that turntable and I remember clearly the Flash of the Blades was like the first song that I really enjoyed. And yeah, actually, that's a deep cut. But when you are 8 years old, there's no internet. You like what you like, and there's no peer pressure or influence by anyone else. And that was the first song that I loved. And follow that was Rhyme of the Asian Mariner. And that's, yeah, unbelievable that a 13-minute song made a huge impact when I was so young, but it did. So those songs blew my 80-year-old mind, and I was into metal from that day. And I mean, I was so young. But, anyways, there's no explanation. It was in the blood, I guess. Of course, later I was in love with the whole album, and I went back and bought all the available releases up to 85. And I saw Summer in Time being released as a new album. And I remember that very well, going to the stores and asking for Summer in Time when it was just released. So after buying Summer in Time and all the other albums, I wanted more, so I started searching for bands that would sound like Maiden. So, without a shadow of doubt, it's my favorite band of all time and influenced me in a huge way and got me into metal and led me to discover so many bands in the 80s. So, here it is, Iron Maiden Power Slave. And I want to show you what I have from back then with me today. The original Power Slave from back in the day, 1986, I bought it. I frame it as you can see it because I don't play much. The vinyl here is full of scratches and the inside is completely worn out for reading the lyrics so much. Then of course I bought another vinyl copy, like a regular black vinyl with a new pressing to replace that one. But then I also bought the picture disc. So it's such an important album for me that I decided to get this one from this collection that had many picture discs. But I think that's the only one that I got from this pressing. And here you can see the print, the picture disc, the two singles from Power Slave, Aces Hide and 2 Minutes to Midnight. I also have, of course, in CD, and also the two singles in vinyls as well, 2 Minutes to Midnight and Aces High. What is cool here is the songs on side B from both albums. King of Twilight from Nectar. It's a cover song from a 70s prog band. And also in 2 Minutes to Midnight, you have Rainbow's Gold from Beckett, a hard rock band from the 70s as well. And from that period as well, from the 86 time frame, I have this maxi single that has the two ones that we talked about already, but also the Number of the Beast live, and one of the most amazing covers in the history of metal, the Cross-Eyed Mary from Jethro Tull that they covered in another single from 1883, I believe. So then you have it, Iron Maiden, Power Slave, and all my albums related to it. The second album I want to talk about is Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses. Again, yeah, not really a metal album, but as I mentioned, this is a list that was influential to me, regardless of the genre or where it came from. So I must say that before the internet, and yes, folks, there was a time that there was no internet, and I was living down in South America, it was actually quite difficult to keep up to date with what was going on in the metal scene in the US or in Europe. But I still found ways to check out at least the cover of some magazines from Europe and from the US. And I remember in 87 I started hearing about this new band. Can you imagine that? A new band called Guns N' Roses. And I was interested because the buzz was quite strong already. Eventually, I start looking for the album and I couldn't find it. Can you imagine that? I would ask in the shops and people wouldn't know what I was talking about. Yeah, there was a time of that. But eventually I found it and I completely got addicted to it instantaneously almost. It is a very good album. You can't deny that, even if you don't like it very much. I did, and I still do. I listen to it sometimes. But it's one of the best debut albums in the history of rock. No question about it. Now, after Appetite for Destruction, I pretty much lost interest. There are some songs afterwards, but really I don't like any album from start to finish after Appetite for Destruction. But it had a huge impact on me. And at that time, glam metal, hard rock was a big thing. And because of Guns N' Roses, I started listening to other bands that was actually less heavy than it. But I was listening to Def Leppard, Bon Jovi, Great White, Faster Pussycat, Poison, Cinderella at the time. Everyone was it. And remember, I was only like 12. Now, of course, I don't listen to most of those bands anymore, but what's important here for this video and this concept here is that Appetite for Destruction was a hugely impactful album in my life when I was growing up. Now, next on the list is another huge name, maybe the biggest, Metallica. And for me, the album that marked my teenager years first, at least, was And Justice for All, because that was the new album. It was the first one that was recommended to me that a friend of a friend of a friend recorded in a cassette and gave to me to check it out. This still relatively new band, but already making a huge impact in the late 80s. And of course, after getting it, I love it from maybe the first listen, if I remember well. And I couldn't stop listening to songs like Harvester of Sorrow or Blackened. I mean, the whole album really captivated me in a huge way. And then, of course, I moved down the discography and got the previous three records, which I love it as well. But still today, and Justice for All has a very deep significance for me and one of my favorite Metallica albums, no questions about it. Now, I lost here as well. I lost interest after And Justice for All. But what's important is the impact that it had on myself. And because of Metallica, it opened the door for me to explore thrash metal in general. And I remember that the next bands that I got into it was Testament when they were releasing Practice What You Preach, and also Megadeth, and of course Sepultura. All right, so we're down to number 4 in my list of the 13 albums that influenced my life, and I will go with Halloween. Now, Halloween was hugely influential for me growing up, and the first album LP that I got from them was a live album, the Live in the UK, which is a pretty short album, but has How Many Tears as well with Michael Kiske in the vocals, which is a superb performance. What an amazing song and performance that was. Now, yeah, this album led me to fall in love with power metal, which I still love very much, and created a huge amount of possibilities of bands that I wanted to explore that would sound like Halloween. So, of course, I still think that the Both Keeper albums are some of the best in history of metal, personally, and definitely the cornerstone of power metal, and I love them very much. But it was Live in the UK that made the mark on myself first, so that's why it's on this list. So I'm gonna stop now with this first installment, and I'll come back another day for the next ones. So the first ones were Power Slave by Iron Maiden, Appetite for Destruction by Guns N' Roses, and Justice for All by Metallica, and Live in UK by Halloween. Thank you very much for watching, and please help me out by liking, subscribing, and leave a comment if you have any questions or opinions about those albums. Thank you, and be mad always!